The story of New Orleans, exploring how slavery shaped the city and how its legacy echoes today. New Orleans, a city built by slavery. New Orleans is often celebrated as a city of rhythm, color, and soul, a place where jazz music spills from the streets and the smell of Creole cooking fills the air. But behind the festive facade lies a darker origin story, one deeply rooted in the brutal institution of slavery. A colonial foundation. The city was founded in 1718 by the French Mississippi Company and named after the Duke of Orleans. From the start, New Orleans was a colonial outpost, strategically built along the Mississippi River for trade and military defense. But the swampy land was inhospitable and labor-intensive to develop. To build the roads, levees, and buildings necessary to sustain the colony, the French turned to enslaved African labor. Throughout the 1700s, shiploads of Africans were brought through the transatlantic slave trade into Louisiana. These men, women, and children were forced to work under brutal conditions, clearing the land, constructing buildings, and planting sugarcane and cotton, lucrative crops that fueled the region's wealth. French colonists imposed the Code Noir, a set of laws that governed the treatment of enslaved people, offering minimal protections while still legalizing cruelty and control, becoming the slave market of the South. As empires shifted, the control of New Orleans passed from France to Spain, back to France, and finally to the United States through the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. Under American rule, slavery in the city grew exponentially. New Orleans quickly became the largest slave market in the United States. Tens of thousands of enslaved people were sold in the city each year. Auction blocks were common on city corners. Families were torn apart, with children separated from parents and husbands from wives. Human beings were inspected like livestock, stripped, prodded, and priced. By 1840, New Orleans had the largest population of enslaved African Americans in the country, and slavery was the backbone of its booming economy. Enslaved people didn't just work on rural plantations. They were blacksmiths, dock workers, housekeepers, musicians, and skilled artisans within the city itself. Culture born from oppression. Even within the horrors of slavery, the African community preserved pieces of their heritage. Nowhere was this more evident than in Congo Square, an open space near the French Quarter where, on Sundays, enslaved and free black people gathered to dance, play drums, and sing. These gatherings kept African traditions alive and planted the seeds of what would become jazz music, a global cultural force born in pain, resistance, and creativity. Creole culture emerged from the fusion of African, French, Spanish, Caribbean, and Native American influences. Enslaved cooks blended ingredients and methods to create iconic dishes like gumbo and jambalaya. Spiritual traditions like voodoo, to a religion rooted in African beliefs, took root, offering hope and identity. The Civil War and the struggle for freedom. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, Louisiana joined the Confederacy. New Orleans fell to Union forces early in the war in 1862. After the Emancipation Proclamation, formerly enslaved people sought to build new lives in freedom. However, the end of slavery did not mean the end of oppression. The Jim Crow era ushered in segregation, disenfranchisement, and systemic racism. Black residents continued to be marginalized, even as they enriched the city's cultural identity. The fight for civil rights persisted into the 20th century, with New Orleans playing a key role in desegregation and voting rights movements. The legacy today. Today, New Orleans stands as a living monument to both resilience and injustice. Statues and street names honoring Confederate leaders and slaveholders have come under public scrutiny, and efforts are being made to memorialize the enslaved people who built the city. Museums like the Whitney Plantation and exhibits in the New Orleans African American Museum offer unflinching looks at this painful history. At the same time, Black communities continue to lead the city's cultural renaissance, from Mardi Gras Indians to second-line parades, spoken word poetry to bounce music. The spirit of resistance lives on in every note of jazz and every step of a parade through Treem or the lower Ninth Ward. New Orleans is not just a city built by slavery. It is a city that endures, evolves, and never forgets.